When armed men kicked through the door of Chen's fine tailoring at 9:30 on a Tuesday evening, David Chen was finishing the hem on a wedding dress. The shop sat in the garment district, a neighborhood where fabric wholesalers and custom clothiers had operated for generations. David had inherited the business from his father, who'd built it stitch by stitch over 40 years. The leader was a man named Vincent Viper Castellano, tall, shaved head, leather jacket stretched tight across his shoulders. He moved like someone who'd never been told no. Behind him came 4 others, spreading through the small shop like oil across water. "Nice little operation you got here," Vincent said, running his finger along a bolt of Italian silk. "Must do pretty good business, making suits for lawyers and bankers." David set down his needle carefully. He'd been a Marine once, 2 tours in Afghanistan before he came home to take over the family business. He recognized the cadence of this conversation, the false friendliness masking something darker. "We're closed," David said. Vincent smiled. "That's funny." Door was unlocked. One of the crew, a stocky man with prison tattoos crawling up his neck, started pulling bolts of fabric off the shelves. Another grabbed a rack of finished suits and shoved it over. The crash of wood and metal filled the small space. "See, here's the thing," Vincent continued. "Running a business in this neighborhood, it's expensive. Risky. Things happen. Fires, break-ins, accidents." He paused, letting the words hang. "But we look out for our own. Make sure the right people stay safe." David understood immediately. This wasn't robbery, it was extortion dressed up as protection. "I don't need protection," he said quietly. Vincent's smile faded slightly. "You sure about that?" One of the men pulled a switchblade, casually testing the edge against his thumb. Another started stuffing expensive fabric into a duffel bag. Cashmere, Egyptian cotton, hand-dyed wool from Scotland. David felt the old instincts stirring. The calculations, the threat assessment, the muscle memory from years of training that never quite left. He could see how this would go if he let it. They'd take what they wanted, come back next week for more, and eventually bleed him dry. And when he couldn't pay, they'd burn the place down. "Last chance," Vincent said. "You want to make this easy?" David's hand moved before his mind finished the thought. He grabbed the nearest thing, a heavy cutting shears, and drove it into the display case beside him. The glass shattered, and in the moment of surprise, he moved. The first man didn't see it coming. David's elbow caught him in the throat, precise and devastating. He went down gagging. The second came at him with the knife, but David had fought men with knives before. He deflected the arm, trapped the wrist, and used the man's own weight to send him crashing into a sewing table. Vincent pulled a gun. David was already moving, using one of the fallen men as a shield as he closed the distance. The gun went off, loud, deafening in the enclosed space, but the bullet went wide. David's fist connected with Vincent's jaw, then his ribs, then his solar plexus. The gun clattered across the floor, but there were still 2 more, and they were learning. They came at him together, coordinated. One caught him with a solid punch to the kidney. David grunted, twisted, drove his knee into the man's stomach. The other grabbed him from behind, trying to lock his arms. For 30 seconds, it was chaos, bodies crashing into displays, fabric tearing, the sharp crack of wood splintering. David fought with the cold efficiency of someone who'd done this before, who'd survived worse in places where mistakes meant death. When it was over, 4 men were groaning on the floor. Vincent was slumped against the wall, breathing hard, blood trickling from his split lip, but 2 of them had made it to the door with a bag full of stolen fabric. David pulled out his phone and dialed 911. Operator's voice was flat, disinterested. "What's your emergency?" "My business was just robbed. Armed men broke in. They got away with merchandise worth thousands." "Are the suspects still on the premises?" "No, they fled about 2 minutes ago. We'll send an officer when one becomes available." "Please file a full report." "Available?" "They just robbed me at gunpoint, sir. We have multiple active emergencies." "An officer will be dispatched as soon as possible." The line went dead. David stood in the wreckage of his shop, the adrenaline slowly draining away. He knew what this was. He'd heard the stories from other business owners in the neighborhood, the whispers over coffee about break-ins that were never investigated, about police who never seemed to arrive in time, thought about his father, who'd built this business through skill and sweat and unshakable pride. Who'd taught him that a man's work was his dignity, that what you built with your own hands couldn't be taken away, but it had been taken. And nobody was coming to help. 2 uniformed officers finally showed up 90 minutes later. They walked through the destroyed shop with the enthusiasm of men filling out a tax form. The older one, a sergeant named Morrison with gray at his temples, barely looked at the damage. "So you're saying 5 men came in, threatened you, and you fought back?" "Armed men," David clarified. "One had a gun. Another had a knife." Morrison exchanged a glance with his partner. "And where are these weapons now?" "They took them when they left." Security cameras? No. Morrison sighed, pulling out a notepad with obvious reluctance. Look, Mr. Chin, I'll file a report, but I gotta be honest with you, these cases don't usually go anywhere. Street crime, you know how it is. David's jaw tightened. This wasn't street crime. It was organized. They knew exactly what they were doing. That's a serious accusation. Morrison's voice carried a warning. You got any proof of that? I'm giving you proof right now. Take fingerprints, check local fences for the fabric, we'll do what we can, Morrison said, closing the notebook. Contact your insurance. Get a better lock on that door. Maybe invest in some security. And that was it. They left without taking any evidence, without asking for descriptions, without showing even basic concern. David watched them go, understanding settling over him like ice water. They weren't going to investigate because they didn't want to investigate, spent the next 2 days reaching out to other shop owners in the district. A tailor 3 blocks down had been hit last month, custom suits stolen, equipment destroyed. A fabric importer had her warehouse broken into twice. A alterations specialist had been forced to close after the 3rd robbery left her unable to afford restocking. All of them had called the police. None of them had gotten help. David started keeping a notebook. Names, dates, patterns. Every business that had been hit was immigrant-owned or minority-owned. Every police report had gone nowhere. And every business owner had been told the same thing: it's just how the city is, nothing we can do, you should move somewhere safer. But this was their neighborhood. These were their livelihoods. On the 3rd night, David went to see Marcus Webb, an old friend who'd stayed on the wrong side of the law after they both came back from overseas. Marcus ran card games in back rooms and knew people who knew people. They met at a diner on the edge of the district, the kind of place where nobody asked questions. You look like hell, Marcus said when David slid into the booth. Feel worse. Marcus studied him over the rim of his coffee cup. You're here asking about Vincent Castellano, aren't you? David nodded slowly. You know him? Know of him. Works for a guy named Anthony Greco. Runs half the protection rackets in this part of the city. Marcus leaned forward. David, you don't want this. Greco's connected, cops, judges, city council. He's been operating for 20 years and nobody's ever touched him. Why? Because he's smart. Keeps his hands clean, uses guys like Vincent to do the dirty work. And because he pays the right people to look the other way. Marcus shook his head. You go after him, you're going after a whole system. Then I go after the system. Marcus was quiet for a long moment. You really want to do this? Do I have a choice? There's always a choice, brother. You can walk away. Rebuild. Move to a different neighborhood. My father didn't walk away when things got hard. Neither will I. Marcus sighed, then pulled out a pen and napkin. Greco operates out of a gentleman's club downtown. The Crown. Private membership, invitation only. That's where he does his real business, meets with his crew, counts his money, plans his next moves. How do I get in? You don't. Not without an invitation. Marcus paused. But I might know someone who can help. Detective named Sarah Martinez. She's been trying to build a case against Greco for years, but she keeps hitting walls. If anyone in the department is clean, it's her. David took the napkin. Thank you. David? Marcus caught his arm. Be careful. Greco doesn't just destroy businesses. He destroys people. Detective Sarah Martinez was in her late 30s, with sharp eyes and the posture of someone who'd spent too many years fighting uphill battles. David found her at a coffee shop near the precinct, off-duty but still wearing her badge. He told her everything: the robbery, the pattern of attacks, the police indifference. She listened without interrupting, her expression growing darker with each detail. When he finished, she was quiet for a moment. Then, how much do you know about Anthony Greco? Not enough. Sarah pulled out her phone, scrolling through photos. Greco started small, loan sharking, gambling. Worked his way up. Now he's got legitimate businesses as fronts, political connections, and half the force on his payroll. He's been systematically targeting immigrant-owned businesses in certain neighborhoods, pushing them out so developers can buy the properties cheap. Why? Money. Gentrification. The neighborhood you're in? Prime real estate. But the small businesses like yours are in the way. So Greco breaks them, forces them to sell, and his developer friends move in. She looked at him directly. You fought back. That makes you a problem. What about you? Can't you arrest him? Sarah's laugh was bitter. I've tried. Every time I get close, evidence disappears. Witnesses recant. My own department blocks me. I filed a complaint with Internal Affairs 6 months ago. You know what happened? I got reassigned to patrol duty for a week as a reminder to stay in my lane. So we're alone in this. No. Sarah leaned forward. You have proof? I have records of every business that's been hit. Dates, amounts stolen, police case numbers that went nowhere. That's circumstantial. I need hard evidence, money trails, witness testimony from inside the organization, something that directly ties Greco to the crimes. She paused. If you can get me that, I can move. But it has to be ironclad. One mistake and we both go down. David thought about the napkin in his pocket, the address Marcus had given him. How do I get inside? You don't. It's too dangerous. I didn't come here for permission. I came here to tell you I'm going in, and if I find something, you need to be ready to act. Sarah studied him, recognition flickering in her eyes. She'd seen that look before, in soldiers, in cops who'd reached their breaking point. You're going to get yourself killed. Maybe. But at least I'll die standing up. The Crown sat on a quiet street downtown, its exterior deliberately understated, no neon signs, no obvious markers. Just a brass plaque beside a black door. David had changed clothes, trading his work attire for the kind of expensive suit that would let him blend in with the clientele. Getting inside meant bypassing security, and that meant being smart. He waited across the street, watching the patterns. Deliveries came through the back. Staff arrived in clusters before opening. And around 10 p.m., a black car pulled up, someone important enough that the doorman personally escorted them inside. David moved. He slipped around to the service entrance where delivery trucks unloaded supplies. A prop, smoking a cigarette, stood guard. David approached casually, holding up a catering invoice he'd forged earlier. Running late with the seafood order, he said, keeping his voice professionally annoyed. Manager's going to have my head. The cook squinted at the invoice, then shrugged. Loading docks through there. Be quick about it. Inside was easier than he expected. Kitchens were always chaos, and nobody questioned someone moving with purpose. He ditched the fake invoice, grabbed a server's jacket from a hook, and walked into the main club like he belonged there. The Crown was elegant leather booths, crystal chandeliers, a stage where a jazz singer crooned to a scattered audience. But the real business happened upstairs, where private rooms hosted meetings that never appeared in any official records. David spotted Vincent immediately, standing near a stairwell that led to the second floor. He'd recognize that silhouette anywhere. But Vincent wasn't alone. 3 other men stood with him, clearly security. David needed to get past them, and that meant creating a distraction. He moved to the bar, ordered a drink he wouldn't touch, and waited. 10 minutes later, a loud argument broke out near the stage, something about a bill, a customer who claimed he'd been overcharged. David had paid the man $50 to cause exactly this scene. In the confusion, as Vincent and his men moved to handle the disturbance, David slipped up the stairs. The second floor was quieter, the sound of the club below muted by thick carpet and expensive wood paneling. He moved carefully, checking doors until he found one slightly ajar. Inside, he could hear voices. David positioned himself where he could see without being seen. Anthony Greco sat behind a mahogany desk, mid-50s, impeccably dressed. Across from him sat a police captain. David recognized him from the precinct, a man named Robert Dawson who'd been with the department for 30 years. The district's almost clear, Greco was saying. 3 more businesses and we can start phase 2. Dawson nodded, sipping whiskey from a crystal glass. And my department? We'll continue to look the other way, as agreed. The payments go through the usual channels. David felt his blood run cold. This wasn't just corruption, it was conspiracy. Systematic, organized destruction of an entire community. He pulled out his phone, setting it to record as he angled it toward the crack in the door. What about the tailor who fought back? Dawson asked. Chen? Greco smiled. We'll handle him. Send a message that discourages future problems. Make it look like an accident, Dawson said. I don't need more paperwork. David's hands tightened on the phone. He had everything he needed: video, audio, 2 men planning crimes in their own words, but then the floor creaked beneath him, the voices inside stopped. A moment of terrible silence, then, we have company. David ran. He made it halfway down the hall before Vincent appeared at the top of the stairs, recognition flashing across his face. You. David didn't stop to talk. He slammed through the nearest door, finding himself in a storage room filled with liquor boxes and cleaning supplies. Dead end. Vincent and 2 others burst in seconds later. Thought you were smart, breaking in here? Vincent pulled his gun. Greco wants to see you. They dragged him back to the office. Greco looked up as David was shoved inside, his expression one of mild irritation. Mr. Chen. I've heard about you. Vincent says you're quite the fighter. David stayed silent, his mind racing. The phone was still in his pocket, they hadn't searched him yet. If he could just keep them talking long enough for Sarah to receive the footage he'd already sent. You've caused me problems, Greco continued. I don't like problems. They're bad for business. Seems like your business is destroying other people's businesses, David said. Greco smiled. I'm a developer. I see potential where others see obstacles. Your little shop? It's sitting on property worth $3 million. But you won't sell, so I have to encourage you. By sending thugs to rob me? By helping you understand that this neighborhood is changing with or without you. You can leave with some dignity, or you can leave in pieces. Greco leaned forward. I'm giving you one last chance. Sign the deed over to my company, take a modest payout, and walk away. Nobody gets hurt. David thought about his father's shop. About the wedding dress still waiting on the mannequin, half finished. About every small business owner who'd been pushed out, erased, told they didn't matter. No, he said. Greco sighed. I was afraid you'd say that. He nodded to Vincent. Make it look like a break-in gone wrong. Body in the river. Vincent smiled, raising his gun, then the windows exploded inward. Police. Nobody move. Officers poured through every entrance, front, back, windows. Sarah Martinez led the charge, her badge held high, a tactical team behind her. Drop your weapons. Hands where I can see them. For a moment, chaos reigned. Vincent started to aim at David, but 3 officers tackled him before he could fire. Greco reached for his desk drawer, but Sarah was faster, her gun trained on his chest. Don't even think about it, Anthony. Captain Dawson stood frozen, his face draining of color as he realized what was happening. Sarah looked at him with something like disgust. Captain Dawson, you're under arrest for conspiracy, bribery, and about 30 other charges we'll figure out later. You have the right to remain silent. David slumped against the wall, adrenaline finally crashing. He pulled out his phone, confirming that the video had indeed uploaded to the cloud and been forwarded to Sarah's secure email. Evidence. Ironclad, undeniable evidence. Sarah appeared beside him as officers led Greco and Dawson out in handcuffs. You okay? I've been better. That was incredibly stupid, what you did. I know. Also incredibly brave. She offered a tired smile. The recording you sent? Combined with what we're finding here, ledgers, transaction records, communications with dirty cops, this is going to bring down half the corruption in this city. David watched as they loaded Greco into a police car. What about the neighborhood? The businesses that were destroyed? We'll start making it right. Asset forfeiture means we can seize Greco's properties and funds. Some of that will go back to the victims. Sarah paused. It won't fix everything overnight, but it's a start. The sun was rising by the time David returned to his shop. The place was still a mess, overturned furniture, scattered fabric, broken glass. But somehow it looked different now. Not destroyed. Just damaged. Something that could be repaired. His phone rang. It was Marcus. You're alive, Marcus said. Barely. I heard what happened. Greco's arrested, half the department under investigation. You actually did it. David looked around his father's shop, the place where he'd learned to sew, where he'd come back to after the war, where he'd tried to build something good. We did it, he corrected. I couldn't have done it alone. Over the next few weeks, the neighborhood began to heal. Other business owners came forward with testimony. More corrupt officers were identified and removed. The district attorney announced a massive corruption probe that would reshape the entire police department, and one evening, as David was working late finishing that wedding dress, his phone buzzed with a message from Sarah. All stolen goods being returned starting tomorrow. Greco's looking at life without parole. Dawson and 5 other officers indicted. The system isn't perfect, but today justice actually worked. Thanks for not giving up. David set the phone down and picked up his needle. Outside, the streetlights flickered on, casting warm light through his shop windows. There was work to do, fabric to replace, displays to rebuild, a business to restore, but for the first time in weeks, he felt something close to peace. He threaded the needle and returned to his work, each stitch a small act of rebuilding, each completed garment a quiet declaration that some things couldn't be taken away. His father had taught him that, and now he'd proven it true.